There's a quiet hum in the air tonight. A stillness that settles in your chest. A feeling that something is waiting just beyond the shadows. On Family Secrets Unveiled, we explore the hidden truths that lie just beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. We peel back the layers of grief, betrayal, and deception, and what we find is often more terrifying than any ghost story. This is a story about a woman who spent a year mourning her sister, only to discover that the urn she held so dear contained the ashes of a complete stranger. It's a tragedy that unfolds with the agonizing slowness of a ticking clock, each beat a step closer to a truth so twisted, it threatened to unravel everything she believed about love, family, and the finality of death. Her name was Elara. She was 37, an artist whose world had been built with clean lines and predictable colors. Her sister, Serafina, was the exact opposite. Serafina was a wild, vibrant splash of chaotic brilliance. She chased adventure, lived on the edge of a map, and laughed with a recklessness that both terrified and thrilled Elara. When the call came from the Italian Dolomites, Elara felt a cold certainty settle over her. Serafina had fallen. A climbing accident, the authorities said. A sudden, terrible slip on a jagged rock face. The finality of it was a brutal blow, but in some dark corner of Elara's mind, it felt predictable. Serafina had always been destined for a grand, final exit, a story that would become a legend among her friends. The funeral was a blur. A week later, a heavy wooden box arrived. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a polished brass urn. Elara held it, the weight of it a physical anchor to her grief. This was it. This was Serafina. She placed the urn on a mantelpiece in her quiet, organized apartment, a silent companion to her sorrow. For months, she would sit with it, a cup of tea in her hands, and talk to it. She told Serafina about her day, about the quiet ache of a world without her laughter, about the way their mother still cried late at night. The urn became a sacred object, the vessel of her sister's spirit, the tangible remains of a love that transcended life itself. But grief is a strange and obsessive thing. It makes you cling to details, to rituals, to the physical remnants of the person you lost. One evening, as a sliver of moonlight fell across the mantel, Elara reached out to clean a speck of dust from the urn. Her fingers brushed against a small, almost imperceptible piece of grit. She picked it up, expecting it to be nothing more than an errant fragment of dust or wood. But it wasn't. It was a tiny, smooth, silver fragment no bigger than a grain of rice, nestled within the cremains. It was metallic, unlike anything she'd ever seen. It looked like a tiny, polished shard, almost like a piece of an old-world watch, but more intricate, more modern. A sliver of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced her heart. Elara knew Serafina. She knew the way her sister's world smelled of sunscreen and cheap wine, the way her belongings were a chaotic mix of passport stamps and tangled jewelry. But there was nothing like this. Serafina would never have owned something so sleek, so precise. A tremor started deep in Elara's chest, a disquiet that began as a whisper and grew into a roar. She told herself it was nothing, just a stray piece of a metal button or a zipper from her sister's clothing. But it didn't feel right. The feeling grew, a cancerous doubt spreading through the very core of her mourning. It became an itch she couldn't scratch, a question she couldn't silence. She took the urn to a specialist, a quiet man who ran a small forensic lab. He was skeptical, gentle but firm. "Mrs. Davies, cremains are often varied. There could be any number of trace elements from the cremation process or even from the items she was wearing." Elara didn't care. She insisted. She watched as he carefully took a sample, a small scoop from the urn, and placed it under a microscope. Hours later, he called her into his office. His face was a mask of professional neutrality, but his eyes held a profound sadness. The cremains. "Mrs. Davies, they contain trace elements of what appear to be synthetic bone grafts and a unique dental filling material. The kind used in very high-end cosmetic dentistry. Your sister, she had extensive dental work, yes?" Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. No. Serafina had perfect teeth. She'd never had a single cavity in her life. The man's voice was a distant echo. "And the DNA? We ran a quick comparison with the blood sample you provided. It's not a match. Not even a distant one." The world tilted. The weight of the urn in her hands, the symbol of her grief, suddenly felt like a lie. Elara stared at the polished brass, at the nameplate etched with Serafina's name, and the chilling, undeniable truth settled over her like a shroud. The ashes weren't her sister's. Her sister's ashes were somewhere else, or maybe her sister wasn't even dead. The quiet dread that had been a whisper was now a scream. The grief that had been so real, so palpable, was now a hollow joke. A cruel, twisted game. And the worst part? She had no idea who was playing it or why. She was standing at the edge of a cliff, and the ground was beginning to crumble. That sliver of doubt, once a quiet companion in the dark, now pulsed with a terrifying energy. Elara's grief wasn't a vessel for memory anymore. It was a furious engine of investigation. The first thing she did was try to retrace Serafina's final steps, but she found the trail was suspiciously thin. Serafina's fiancé, Marcus, a man of quiet charm and polished manners, had handled all the arrangements. He had insisted on a direct cremation in Italy, claiming it was simpler, less painful for everyone involved. At the time, Elara had been too consumed by her own sorrow to question it. Now, his words felt like a carefully constructed wall. Elara reached out to the Italian authorities, but their reports were final. A fatal climbing accident, an immediate recovery of the body, and cremation as per the family's wishes. They had no reason to doubt Marcus. He had been so convincing. Elara's questions were met with polite stonewalling. She tried to find Serafina's climbing partner, but Marcus said she'd been alone. The story felt too neat, too perfect. Something was wrong. She began by combing through Serafina's old apartment. It was a place of organized chaos, a testament to her free spirit. But amidst the vibrant tapestries and piles of books, Elara found something out of place. Tucked away in a hollowed-out book on a shelf, she found a small, old-school digital recorder. It was the kind you'd see in movies from the 90s, and it seemed completely out of character for Serafina, a woman who lived on her phone and social media. The tape inside was labeled simply M. Elara's hands trembled as she pressed play. A familiar voice, Serafina's, filled the room, but it was low, hesitant, and laced with fear. "I don't know what to do. Marcus, he's not who I thought he was. He's in too deep. I found something, a spreadsheet, names and figures. It's not just a side business, Elara, it's bigger. Darker. He told me it was antiquities, but it's not just that. He's dealing with people. Trafficking. I think he's connected to that disappearances case in Rome." The world fell away. The air left Elara's lungs. The voice continued, a desperate confession, a cry for help she was too late to hear. Serafina detailed Marcus's shifting moods, the way he would disappear for days without explanation, the chilling nonchalance with which he would discuss his business trips. The tape ended abruptly, a small click followed by static, as if Serafina had been interrupted. The name of her channel, Family Secrets Unveiled, took on a terrifying new meaning. The secret wasn't about some long-lost relative or a hidden fortune. It was about a monster, living and breathing, who had stolen her sister and replaced her with a ghost. And then there was the silver fragment. The one she'd found in the urn. She had almost dismissed it. She ran a search online for silver microsculpture and unique silver objects. Nothing. But then she tried a different approach. She used a high-resolution camera to take a macro shot, zoomed in until the minuscule details of the twisted metal were clear. Etched into the side, almost invisible to the naked eye, was a symbol, a stylized letter with a tiny snake coiling around it. It was the logo of an exclusive private security firm in Switzerland, a firm that specialized in asset protection and discreet transport. Marcus had once mentioned a business trip to Geneva, something about a consultation. He'd smiled and said it was a lucrative deal. Elara felt a chill run down her spine. The asset wasn't a diamond or a piece of art. It was a body. The more she dug, the more she found. An email account Serafina had set up under a fake name, filled with cryptic messages to a burner phone number, a set of GPS coordinates scribbled on a napkin, and the final, chilling piece of the puzzle, a photo from Serafina's cloud storage. It was a selfie she'd taken in Italy, but in the background, out of focus, was Marcus. He wasn't looking at her. He was talking on the phone, his face a mask of cold, professional intensity, standing next to a black van with the same security firm's logo on the side. The photo was dated 3 days before the supposed climbing accident. Serafina hadn't died in a tragic fall. She had been with Marcus, and he had been orchestrating something. Elara felt the walls of her neat, predictable life closing in on her. The urn was a fake. The death was a lie. The man who had been a trusted friend and soon-to-be brother-in-law was a murderer. The truth she had been searching for wasn't a form of closure, it was a door to a new, terrifying reality. She was alone in this. The authorities wouldn't listen. Marcus would realize she was getting close. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that he wouldn't let her live with what she now knew. The game was no longer about finding the truth, it was about survival. She looked at the empty spot on her mantelpiece where the urn had once stood. A year of tears, of quiet conversations with a stranger's ashes, of a grief that was now tainted by deceit. Elara picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over a number she hadn't dialed in a long time. The man from the forensic lab. She had to tell him. But as she did, the doorbell rang. A sudden, jarring sound in the quiet apartment. She looked through the peephole and saw a face she had trusted, a smile that had always brought her comfort. It was Marcus. And in his hand, he held a single, perfect white lily, the same flower he had brought to Serafina's funeral. The sight of Marcus at the door, holding that lily, was a jarring moment of theatrical horror. Elara's mind raced. He knew. He must have seen her digging, her relentless questions. She took a shuddering breath and opened the door, a polite, forced smile on her face, but her eyes, she knew, must have been screaming. Marcus stepped in, his polished smile not reaching his eyes. He handed her the lily. "I was just in the neighborhood," he said, the lie hanging thick in the air between them. "I thought of Serafina." Her hands shook as she took the flower. "You shouldn't have," she whispered. The scent of the lily, once a symbol of purity, now smelled like death. She backed away, creating distance. Marcus's eyes scanned the room, landing on the empty spot on the mantelpiece. His smile tightened. "The urn," he said, the words a low, controlled hum. "You've moved it." I put it away," she stammered, her voice a brittle thing. It was too hard. He didn't respond, just took another step towards her, and the silent space between them filled with a primal, animalistic dread. She needed to get out. She needed to run. But he was blocking the door, and his calm, controlled demeanor was far more terrifying than any open threat. "Elara," he said, and the way he said her name was a warning. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." The polished veneer cracked, and for the first time, she saw the true face of the man who had been a part of her family. His eyes were cold, and a dark anger simmered beneath the surface. He explained, not with rage, but with a chilling, pragmatic logic. Serafina, she was always so dramatic. She was going to expose everything. And I couldn't let that happen. Not after I'd built so much. He confessed it like a business transaction, like a regrettable but necessary cost. He had used her death to dispose of a troublesome associate, an identity thief who was getting too close. The body in the urn was not a stranger, but a man who had betrayed him. Serafina's body, he confessed, was long gone, disposed of in a remote location where no one would ever find it. "She's at peace," he said, as if this was a kindness. "More than you will be." Elara felt the cold dread give way to a white-hot fury. He had stolen everything. Her sister, her peace, her grief. He had defiled the very memory of Serafina with his callous, monstrous truth. "You're a monster," she spat, her voice thick with venom. "You killed her. You stole her life." Marcus laughed, a short, humorless sound. "I created a new one for her. A final chapter. One that made sense. She's a legend now, a tragic story for you to tell your friends. Isn't that what she always wanted?" The grand finale. He advanced, his hand reaching for her, and Elara knew this was it. This was the end. But in that moment of terror, her mind cleared with a cold, desperate clarity. She had to survive. For Serafina. She remembered the GPS coordinates. The one she'd found on the napkin. She had a plan, a desperate, final gamble. "You're right," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I have no idea what I'm doing. I've told everyone about what I found. The police, the forensic lab, everyone. They're coming. They're listening now." It was a lie, a fabricated truth to buy herself a few precious seconds. For a moment, she saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He hesitated, his hand dropping. That was all she needed. She grabbed the heavy, carved wooden box that had held the urn and swung it with all her strength. It struck him on the side of the head with a sickening thud. He staggered back, a look of shocked disbelief on his face, a thin line of blood already forming at his temple. Elara didn't wait. She bolted, tearing open the door, her phone in her hand. She ran down the hallway, her heart pounding in her ears, the sound of his enraged roar echoing behind her. She didn't stop until she was out on the street, breathless and shaking. She called the police. She told them everything, about the urn, about the lab report, about the tape recorder, and the chilling confession Marcus had just made. They were skeptical at first, but the panic in her voice was undeniable. They sent a car. As she waited, huddled on the curb, she heard sirens in the distance. And as they grew louder, she saw a new message appear on her phone. It was an email from a burner account. She hadn't told anyone about this. It was an anonymous message from a hidden server, a final piece of Serafina's desperate, calculated trail. The subject line was chillingly simple, "Find me." And attached was a single, cryptic video file. The twist was so profound, so devastating, that it took her breath away. Serafina hadn't just left breadcrumbs for Elara. She had set a trap. And as the police cars arrived, their flashing lights illuminating the street, Elara knew that the end of this story wasn't just about justice. It was about something far more personal, far more painful, and far more complex. The final act was just beginning. The video file was short, no more than 90 seconds, and it was a masterpiece of cold, desperate strategy. It showed Serafina, her face drawn and pale, speaking into the camera. She explained that she knew Marcus was onto her, that she couldn't risk leaving a trail that would put Elara in danger. So she had concocted a desperate plan. She'd recorded this video, uploaded it to a private server, and left the GPS coordinates on the napkin for Elara to find. The coordinates weren't a location of her remains, but the location of the storage unit Marcus had used. In that unit, amidst crates of what he claimed were antiquities, Serafina had hidden an entire cache of evidence: the digital spreadsheets, the financial records, the photos of his criminal associates, and a full, typed confession detailing everything. She had found a way to become a ghost, a martyr to the truth, ensuring that even in her absence, her justice would be swift and certain. The ultimate act of a free spirit, her final, grand, defiant flourish. Elara handed her phone to the detective. He watched the video, his expression shifting from skepticism to grim fascination. The sirens converged on the apartment complex, and Marcus, disoriented and bleeding, was taken into custody without a fight. His grand conspiracy, his carefully constructed lie, was unraveled not by a police investigation, but by a dead woman's meticulously planned final message. The ashes in the urn had been a diversion, a smokescreen to hide a far more terrible truth, a truth that Serafina knew only her sister would have the tenacity to uncover. The days and weeks that followed were a whirlwind of interviews, depositions, and the slow, grinding process of justice. Elara worked with the authorities to unravel Marcus's network, his dark trade in human lives and stolen artifacts. The man whose ashes had been placed in the urn was identified as an operative who had double-crossed Marcus. His family was notified, finally able to give him a proper burial, a closure Elara knew all too well was a precious and fragile thing. The coordinates led them to the storage unit, and the evidence within was irrefutable. Marcus was sentenced to multiple life sentences. The empire he built on lies and death crumbled. But what about Serafina? Her final confession, the tape that Elara had listened to so many times, ended with her saying, "I know he'll try to get rid of my body. It will be a cold place. A high place. Somewhere he thinks no one will ever look." The coordinates she left were for the storage unit, not for her body. The authorities searched, but found nothing. The police suggested that Marcus had disposed of her body in a remote, high-altitude location in the Italian Alps. They assumed it was a final act of cruelty, an eternal secret. Elara couldn't accept that. She had given a stranger a final resting place. She had brought down a monster. But she had to find her sister. She used the cryptic clues from the video, the things Serafina had said in her last moments, and she returned to the Dolomites. She spent months hiking, searching, and hoping. And in a remote, windswept crevice high on a mountain peak, she found it. A small, almost imperceptible cairn, a pile of rocks arranged to mark a spot. And beneath it, a tiny locket. It was Serafina's locket, one she had worn since childhood. Elara knew that her sister's body would never be found, but this small cairn, this locket, was a final, private, intimate gesture. A goodbye. A memorial. Elara never moved the locket. She built her own cairn next to it, and on top, she placed a single, polished piece of silver, the one she had found in the urn. A testament to a life, to a lie, and to the relentless, stubborn pursuit of a sister's love. She finally understood. The ashes of a stranger had been a test. A dark, twisted challenge. And by accepting it, by facing the horror and the lies, she had not only found justice for Serafina, but had also found a new, stronger version of herself. The urn had been a lie, but it had led her to the most profound truth of all, that the bonds of family are not defined by blood or by death, but by the lengths we are willing to go for those we love. The most chilling secrets, as this story has taught us, are often the ones closest to home. They are not always lurking in the shadows. Sometimes they hide in plain sight, disguised as grief or love or normalcy. This is the truth of the human heart, and it is a truth that is both beautiful and terrifying. If this story resonated with you, if it made you question the secrets that might be hiding in your own life, then I hope you'll join me again on Family Secrets Unveiled. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chilling tale.